Okay, now that we have MAMP ready to go, got our server here, we are going to install WordPress. So that takes a couple of different steps. Sometimes in other local server software, they may have like a one-click WordPress install. I know one called Desktop Server has a nice little toolkit for that. And that's great, so totally use that if that works for you. We're going to go through the step-by-step process of doing it through MAMP and kind of making our own database and dragging the folder into kind of the manual way. You'll also find in hosting companies sometimes like Bluehost or GoDaddy, I'm sure, they have an option to do a one-click WordPress install, and then you can add some configuration to that based on like what name it is and what file you want it to be stored in. But sometimes those install a lot of other marketing junk that's not so nice. And they may install a lot of other themes, extra stuff that you don't need. So generally, doing a manual install of WordPress is the way to go. So with MAMP, we're going to start out by using phpMyAdmin to create a new database. And like we did in the lesson, whenever I did this demo in a lesson, we did that in the command line. So that's totally possible as well. But we can do it quickly through phpMyAdmin here. And MAMP has a pretty old version of phpMyAdmin, but it doesn't actually make a difference. So we can go to database, and then I'm going to create a new database called, and I'll keep with the same website I'm doing in the class. So cocktails WP. So I'm adding a little note in here indicating in the name that it is a WordPress installation, which is a good idea. Definitely don't worry about any of this stuff. This is all just some configuration things that come with MAMP, not hurting anyone. And make sure your database name is no spaces, only underscores. Sometimes people use camel case, that's fine too. So let's create. And nice, so now I have this. And next we're going to download WordPress. Go by WordPress. No. And download WordPress. Download WordPress here. Okay, now I got WordPress down here, and so I'm just going to show that in Finder. Unzip. And I'm going to rename this folder. So although this is WordPress, and this is a correctly named folder, I'm going to have several WordPress installs in my sites folder, generally. I mean, eventually I'm going to keep making WordPress sites after this class. So I want to name this something that indicates what site it is rather than that it's just WordPress. So I'm going to call this cocktails. And then I'm going to drag, and you can call this cocktails website, or if you're doing an artist website, you could say so-and-so's portfolio or just portfolio, something like that. Whatever you like, but something short, preferably one-ish word. I gotta find my sites folder, so I'm gonna do command, I'm gonna open a new Finder window, and then I'll do Command-Shift-G again, and back to home. And then Command-3, so I wanna get all these in their nice, this nicer view that I like. And so inside sites, I'm going to drag my cocktails WordPress install into sites like that. And then next, we're going to install WordPress now. So right now we just have the files downloaded, which is not the same as installing it. So installing it means adding a few configuration variables and hooking up our databases. So configuration variables is a fancy way of saying fill out a form. So if I go to now localhost 8888 cocktails, and with this this is like a long URL that totally, for vanity's sake, drives me crazy. So I will usually set up a virtual host whenever I do this in non-demo mode, and I'll post a link to a guide for doing that with MAMP. It's a little more complicated getting into some configuration files, but with MAMP Pro, not to plug it so much, but I think you can make virtual hosts very easily. And in that sense, you would have something like, if I want to come up with a little short name, I could say, I was almost going to write this, which no, I'm not calling my site that. Oof. So maybe just like even ctl.local. Something really short, easy to write, that's a little cleaner. But this localhost 888 is totally fine for what we're doing. So if I go here, you're going to see I get into WordPress. Right, so this, remember, this localhost 8888 is an alias pointing to that sites folder. So continue, yes, English. Okay, database name, username, password, host. I do have those, at least remember the database name, cocktails_WP. So let's go. And I'm going to change my database name to, then username and password. I don't remember setting those, right? So by default, MAMP comes with passwords called root. Username and password, root, and root. Obviously, you would not want to set up that to be your real password on an actual database, but for now, this is fine. So we'll submit. All right, Sparky, thanks WordPress. Let's run the install. Cool, and so now I'm filling out information that's gonna go directly into the database of my site. That last screen is filling out a little set of variables inside our WP config file. So you can totally do this inside the WP config file instead of going through the admin here. If we open up this file, and I'm just gonna open up it by itself instead of dragging the folder on because it's pretty self-contained. We don't need to see a file structure or anything here. So whenever I filled out those forms, it generated this WordPress file, this WP config file, and replaced the DB name with the database name that we filled in. The DB user was the username field, password field, host is localhost. So there you go. There's your nice WP config file. And now site title, I'm gonna say cocktails, website, fun. Username, I can keep it something kind of bad if I want to, because we're just working on this locally. So I'm just gonna say, well, I'll say cocktails admin. So that's probably a fine username. You would not want to do just admin because that's like the textbook. Everybody knows that, or makes your site a little bit more vulnerable to have just admin be the password or be the username, because so many WordPress sites, that used to be the default username, and so a lot of vulnerability comes from having just the admin username. So we're going to say cocktails admin. And then this new feature in WordPress 4.3 is so wonderful to generate passwords like this. So you're going to want to take note of this. And I'm just going to open up a little text or it's a new file here. And then cocktails admin, like so. Install work. Oh, I need my email. And because this is a local install, this doesn't make any difference here. And obviously search engines can't index our local site if it's just on our computers. So we'll log in. And I'll say, yay, now we're in WordPress. So I can look at my website. And this is all running from my local computer here. So cool. So that's all we need to really do before the next class is get this installed. And then next video, we're going to go through installing some plugins. So that's kind of the setup that we're doing before we get into Timber and doing lots more like WordPress development. So we're all really just setting everything up now and setting the stage. So, okay, thank you. And next video will be plugins.